And a very good morning to you. Happy in-between Christmas and New Year. We're live from London. This is Monocle on Sunday with me, Emma Nelson. Coming up, my guests, David Schlesinger and Stephen DL, share their views on the week's, indeed the year's biggest stories. Stephen, welcome. What have you spotted?
Well, I would love to say we're going out with a bang, with joy at the end of 2025, but I'm not sure I can. The war in Ukraine looms large, and indeed, this is a day when President Trump is meeting President Zelensky again. So that's certainly dominating my headlines, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much indeed for that. We'll also be heading to Istanbul.
I'm Hannah Lucinda Smith in Istanbul, and coming up, I'll be talking about the questions surrounding a plane crash here in Turkey and a place to take out some of your festive frustrations.
Plus, Monocle's editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, joins us from St. Moritz. It's the 28th of December, 2025. Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday with Emma Nelson.
And the warmest of welcomes to David Schlesinger, independent advisor and commentator on media, journalism and China, and to Stephen DL, Russia analyst. A very happy in-between Christmas.
Good morning.
I think the Germans call it the in-between year, which I think is lovely. Is that sort of little gap before we sandwich 2025 and 26 together. Briefly, how was your Christmas? What did you do?
Quiet, enjoyable, demolished a goose with friends. What could be better?
Nothing better than demolishing a goose. How about you, Stephen?
Well,
you had family plenty.
Indeed, quiet, enjoyable, saw all the family and demolished a large turkey with some Ukrainian friends as well as family.
How lovely. That must have been very, very good to have. Let's head straight to St. Moritz, where Monocle's editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, is standing by. A very good morning to you, Tyler. Guten Morgen.
Good morning. Good morning, Emma. Good morning, gentlemen. Gorgeous morning up here at 1850 meters above sea level. Cloudless, Emma, gorgeous. And winter has properly arrived. It was looking a bit sort of touch and go at the sort of the back end of the week before last, but the lake is frozen over. You can hear I think it's a rescue helicopter on its way in. So already the first snapped ankle of the morning, it looks like.
First casualty of the day. Great news. This is fabulous timing. Apart from injuries, what's it like up there today? How's Christmas been?
Christmas was great, and I'm sorry I couldn't join you last week. I was in Bahrain, and I couldn't speak last week. It was just I had that cold. The cold is almost gone, but it is. It's an annual event. As soon as Christmas arrives and everything slows down a little bit, even though I had to sort of do a mad dash to the Gulf for 2 days, the sort of the cold, the throatiness caught up with me. So I wouldn't have been fit for radio last week, but all set and limber today. Up here, it's absolutely packed. So normally, in this stretch of the Alps, sort of 23, 24, even the 25th, it's the hardcore. It's busy, but then come the 26th, everybody arrives. I counted just sort of looking up at that helicopter. But the other day, there were 35 aircraft into that very, very tiny airport. You know where it is here. It is just really a sliver, down the Engadine Valley. And I was just looking at the flights coming in, Kuwait City, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. I mean, we're talking big, hulking global expresses. Big Gulf streams. And I think one of the interesting things, just looking at the demographics of this place, if you would have been here, and of course we'll be sort of touching on Ukraine versus Russia in a moment, and maybe talking a little bit about China as well. So Chinese visitors to to St. Moritz was never really a thing. Now you definitely see that you have wealthy mainland families who are coming to visit. Yes, you used to have Hong Kongers and Taiwanese, but now you see Chinese. Of course, Russians are not here, other than those who have managed to stay outside of Russia through various citizenships, I guess, but really not present. But what you really notice are sort of the Gulfies, indeed the Kuwaitis, the Qataris, people from the UAE, really here in droves. And I have to say, packing into our little cafe retail space as well, because there's some certain affection between the Gulf and Monocle matcha lattes.
Indeed, right. So let's look at this a little bit. Let's bring David in a bit. The idea of that Chinese tourism has expounded. It's got huge in the last couple of years. So it's no surprise that they've found St. Moritz.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a great deal of wealth in China right now, and it needs to find a way out. Now, there is a real bifurcation in the society. There are a lot of poor people who cannot travel. There are a lot of people who can only travel domestically, and they do. But there is a subset that can travel internationally, and they are going on all the routes. And of course, anytime you have a country of 1.4 billion, a 1% or even a 1/10 of 1% is a very large number.
And it's an interesting thing when you are actually playing host, isn't it, Tyler? That St. Moritz knows what it does, and it does it extremely well, arguably better than anybody. But then when you get a whole new swathe of brand new customers coming through, how does that change things?
Well, I think part of it is just the dynamic of what it means to be an alpine resort today as well, because St. Moritz is one of the higher resorts in Europe. So unlike, let's say, a glittery place like Stade, where of course, you also have a lot of wealthy people from all over the world going. It's much lower. It's at about 900 meters. I received photos yesterday from some friends, and it's very green. There is snow on the slopes, but it really looks like springtime. So, where you have a resort which is a bit hardcore, where there is always snow, which this place it is about cross country skiing and downhill skiing, and bobsledding and curling and all of these other winter pursuits. Suddenly, when you have almost an invasion of people who come from elsewhere who are not from snowy cultures, it puts pressure on the village and village life, because these places were built for people to be up on the slopes by day, and maybe not packing into stores and cafes. There was always there was always going to be sort of the other half, maybe the child, the grandmother who would come along for Christmas who wasn't skiing, and they would be part of life in the village. But now it really sort of feels like you're on a very, very busy, smart shopping street somewhere in the world, with so many people who choose not to go up to the mountains, and that adds a pressure. Of course, it creates opportunity as well for the luxury brands, for the hotel groups, etc. And I would say one of the main things is just the sheer amount of culinary innovation that is happening, and partly to appeal to the appetites of these consumers who are not coming from Hamburg, who are not coming from Paris, who are not coming from Zurich.
Let's bring Stephen in. He wanted to say something.
Yes, Tyler, good morning. It's Stephen DL here. Season's greetings to you, sir. I think that's the best thing to say between Christmas and New Year.
It is.
I was very interested to hear about the influx of Chinese and, of course, far fewer Russians. And obviously I'm more used to dealing with Russians, and I know how difficult, shall we say, some of these wealthy Russians can be. How is St. Moritz, how are the people in the service industries, how are they coping with dealing with Chinese people? Do they treat them the same as the Russians? Do they find they're easier to deal with or more difficult? It just struck me as very curious.
Yeah, listen, I think that there are a lot of people here who are not sad to see the Russians go. Maybe they were happy to see them because they could fill in that, we were talking about those in-between periods. You always had, of course, the Russian Christmas, of course, coming hot on the heels of our Christmas. So they were great that they could get the room rates for them. But as you said, the demands of those guests, the fact that people using their speakerphones around the swimming pool or even in the quiet room post-massage, you'd hear all of these stories a decade ago. So I think that no one is missing that crowd. I think, in terms of having Chinese customers now, it's just the sheer number that, of course, we know that Asian families they travel in large groups. And I think that is something which is different because, of course, even you would see, maybe you'd have Russian couples traveling before, but they would not come en masse, with the mother-in-law and mom and cousins and everyone else. So that is the one thing, because, just Europe is not, we could even say Europe's not built that way, that you sort of arrive and have lunch for 12, right? China is built for that. Hong Kong is built for that. Much of Asia is built that way. So I think that is probably one of the main challenges. Where do you find that much real estate in terms of just wood for tabletops to fit these people in? And I would say that is the demand, that you have to, of course, appeal to these large groups. Having interconnecting rooms, how do you reconfigure the overall guest experience? I think that is a challenge. And listen, there's also a side of maybe, you shouldn't wear your slippers down to breakfast as well.
But there's also the idea that you shouldn't get too used to these Chinese tourists either. I think this is a great story about how the news does influence tourist flows. Because of the obvious war, you have fewer Russians. you have more Chinese because China and Japan are on the outs. And in previous years, anyone who wanted winter sport from China would just make a quick hop over to Japan and do everything they want to do. Now there are political tensions. It is certainly not the thing to do to travel to Japan if you are a well-connected Chinese person. So you go to Europe. But that can change again. And so I wouldn't reconfigure your dining rooms too soon.
No, and listen, I think it's a very good point, because you're absolutely right. I think that the hoteliers up in Hokkaido right now, I think they were a little bit panicked for sure when things flared up months back or weeks back at this point, I guess. But now, I think it's they're happy to see Australians and Kiwis, and of course Thais and Taiwanese. But because that was the other side of it as well. Be careful what you wish for. Great, all those Chinese coming in also pushed a lot of other people out. I would say one of the good lessons here, though, Emma, is that they're quite clever here about also when I mention people from Hamburg and Zurich and elsewhere, they know that also, the bedrock of this place as well are the European families who've been coming here for generations. So, maybe you have to reconfigure big tables, etc., but you still have to be nice to the Bavarian crowds, and even the Austrians who, my goodness, who dare to cross the border into Switzerland. You have to keep them on side as well, because they're the ones who are going to be coming back again and again.
Indeed, and the Canadian-Estonian contingent as well.
I think Canadian historian. I realize it's been 25 years as well. Talk about generations. This is probably, I think, our 25th Christmas here. Very much part of the furniture. Maybe not large tabletops, but comfy chairs for sure.
Tell us about the shop. You mentioned that you've been the shop has been open. The matcha lattes have been served aplenty, which will obviously bring a smile to your face. And have you been setting yourself to work on the shop floor?
Of course. Well, listen, it was Christmas Eve. I do stop by the shop every day. For those listeners who have not experienced our store up here, it started life as this when I came here 25 years ago. It was a kiosk in the corner of the Stefani Hotel, and this was a time when Samurai probably had 5 little kiosks and newspaper magazine stands around the village. Now there are just 2. And this is on the main roundabout, so it's right smack in the middle of the village. You cannot miss it, and so it's had a life as a yacht charter shop and a jet charter shop, and it's had various inclinations. Also been empty for a long time. We took it 4 seasons ago, so this is season 3 or 4. I think it's season 4, and it is maybe 9 or 10 square meters. It is the tiniest shop here, but we managed to fit a coffee machine in there, and mags and books and merchandise. But we didn't think it would become a coffee shop. But it's just this is one the mountains up here. It's not a place where takeaway happens, and yet of course because you have lots of people from elsewhere in the world who are not from the valley. Because of course if you're from the valley, you want to sit down and have your cappuccino. Or your hazy shoki out of a nice porcelain cup. You don't want to walk around the village with it. Well, listen, if you're visiting from Los Angeles or Mexico City, you want to have your hot chocolate on the go. So we seem to have become the place for people to go, for their takeaway hot beverages. And on Christmas Eve, there were groups of gentlemen coming in from the Gulf. 11 hot chocolates, please. This is a one nozzle machine, Emma. So someone has to sort of do a floor show on the side, and also, see if people are interested in subscriptions or if they want a Samurai sweatshirt or whatever it may be. Anyway, it was, I realized, and it's very difficult to have 2 staff members in a 10 square meter shop. Then when you also have lots of gentlemen from Abu Dhabi, smoking cigars, not inside, but mostly outside. It's been a bit of a treat. So I've been doing my shift pretty much every day, because when people do come down from the slopes, end of day, around 4 or 5 o'clock, it's absolutely heaving. I'm proposing today that we need to start adding a shot of rum to go with the hot chocolate as well, especially after hours.
But yes, maybe depending on your client. Yes, and I was surprised actually that a shot of rum isn't actually in a hot chocolate. It's de rigueur around the Nelsons.
Well, I was it should be here as well. Also, I would say that probably lots of our guests from the Gulf are not shy on a good bottle of bubbles or a shot of rum either. I think that's why they're in Samurai to begin with.
Okay, I won't. You didn't say that, right? Tyler, we're going to join you back again in about half an hour's time. Go and run your errands and rescue some people from the mountain.
Will do.
See you later. Thank you so much. That was our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, off to do some stuff, and then he'll join us at the end of the programme. Welcome, David Schlesinger and Stephen DL. That lovely, cosy, beautiful in-between moment that we were talking about, that extra shot of rum in your hot chocolate, which is not something that ordinarily you'd think about doing at all during the year. And then suddenly
really?
It's like, oh, go on, I'll do it.
You don't think about that at all during
Not
the rest
at
of the
all.
year?
Never.
Oh,
Never,
okay.
never, never. It never crosses my pure little mind. But that idea where you just think, oh, go on then. It's a lovely feeling over Christmas, isn't it? Do you have the oh, go on then feeling?
No, because I stopped drinking some years
But you
ago.
can have others. You don't
and-
need to indulge alcohol, alcohol-wise.
Oh,
You
with the
can
hot
have
chocolate. I've had more hot chocolate in the last week, 2 weeks, than probably the rest of the year. So yeah, and just like that, it is hot chocolate itself. And I can appreciate for those who want rum, although I would have had brandy or whiskey. Anyway.
It's an Austrian rum for me, 60% proof. It's brilliant.
Okay, but no, it
Grows hairs
is
on your
that
chest
warming
overnight.
feeling. Yeah.
How about you, David?
Well, I mean, normally I try to do intermittent fasting to try to keep myself trim and fit. But I've
I
sort
often
of,
see you running down round.
Well, I
David
run-
and I live near each other.
I run every day. But I eat to run and I run to eat. So that doesn't really do anything for the weight. But I have been trying this intermittent fasting, which does work pretty well, except during this period when I've thrown that all out.
It just makes me grumpy. Right, let's have a look at some of the news. Stephen, we do have to talk about what's happening in Mar-a-Lago today.
We do.
With Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky possibly on the point of coming to some sort of peace plan which the Ukrainians will accept. That said, we do need to ask what the Russians are going to think. So let's lay down what's actually going to happen in Mar-a-Lago today.
Well, President Trump is, at his home, is going to. I hesitate to say welcome President Zelensky. He is receiving President Zelensky, but as it's the end of the year, let's look back over the year, and if we think back to the first meeting in the White House between Trump and Zelensky, it was appalling. Zelensky was hung out to dry. It was clearly all set up that they were going to try and make a fool of him. He held his end up very well and actually left with some dignity, which is more than can be said for others on the American side in the White House. Also before that, of course, America had nailed its flag to the mast. I still find this absolutely staggering. On the anniversary, the third anniversary of the start of the war, that the USA voted with Russia, Iran, Belarus, North Korea, Venezuela to say that Russia was not responsible for the war. That was a huge warning sign to the rest of the world, and particularly to Europe, that America can no longer be relied on as an ally. And I think everything that's happened since then shows that that is the case. President Trump rolled out the red carpet for President Putin in Alaska. President Putin, who's on the wanted list in many countries, and it seems that Trump is so besotted with this idea of this dictator that any goodness has gone out of the window.
It's interesting you mentioned that moment when Putin and Trump met each other, because one would have considered it to be one of the great changing moments in the whole of the year. But it didn't. It just came and went in so many ways.
It came and went. It changed one thing. And the one thing which is terrible for Ukraine is, if you look back since then, the number of Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukraine have increased dramatically. There have been new records set for the numbers of missiles and drones fired at Ukraine. And only in the last 24, 36 hours, overnight, Friday into Saturday, the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, alone was bombarded by some 600 drones and missiles. This is one thing I find absolutely staggering, that Trump doesn't seem to get this, or those around him, that when Ukraine has attacked Russia, they are genuinely attacking military facilities. When Russia attacks Ukraine, they are genuinely deliberately attacking civilian targets, blocks of flats, killing innocent people. And that's been the one result of that meeting back in Alaska, that Russia has stepped up its number of its attacks on Ukraine. And Trump doesn't seem bothered by this.
There's a good article. I'm trying to remember which it was. It's either the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times this weekend, David, that talks about the end of multilateralism and the idea that Trump actually has completely put pay to that way of thinking. From your point of view, would you agree?
I think Trump sees the world very simply, that the U.S. controls the Americas, Russia controls Europe, and China controls Asia. And that it's a three-power world. You only have to listen to what J.D. Vance said about how it was a threat to U.S. security that there were nuclear weapons in Europe. That's a mind-boggling statement. It just shows they don't want to have other powers around.
But there is this rise, which is also in this article, which talks about perhaps the end of multilateralism, but the rise of plurilateralism, which is going to take a little while to explain. But what it is, it's groups of countries who come together over one subject where they can agree. I mean, we've seen an awful lot of that in the likes of China and that part of the world, and so ASEAN as well.
It's pure pragmatism. It has nothing to do with ideology. It's a very pragmatic idea. Is what can I do? What do I need now? Who can help me get it?
But this idea also that, that David's saying, he's just explained, I totally agree, David, by the way, so Russia, America, USA and China, this is 1984. This is what happens in Orwell's novel, that there are three powers and at one time two of them are always allied and against the other one, and then the next day it can switch around. The phrase, one of the phrases of the year for me that sticks out was that 1984 was supposed to be a warning, not a handbook. But that's what, particularly, I think all three, actually, Trump, Putin and Xi, all seem to treat it like, this is the way ahead.
And the way that the West now views it as well. I mean, you mentioned the idea of the Trump-Putin meeting this year. I think there's something in the Wall Street Journal which talks about the inner circle of Donald Trump seeing Russia as an El Dorado for business. I know that we have Charles Hecker, who comes on an awful lot talking about the arc of narrative that starts that everybody rushes in post-Glasnost and Perestroika, and they set up shop. Enormous Western businesses think that they will do well, and they do well. Everybody is hoiked out the minute that Russia mounts its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But there is that real temptation now that we know that Western businesses will go back into Russia. But this article says that actually the conditions for the West going back into Russia will have changed profoundly.
Dramatically. Yes, they will indeed. And I speak as someone who for 5 years ran the Russell British Chamber of Commerce, trying to encourage British business to do business in Russia. And the situation has changed dramatically. And people learn? People don't seem to learn from history, but they should learn from the 1990s, because a lot of British Western companies that went in the 1990s got their fingers burnt. Some of them were charlatans who were going in to try and make a fast buck and get out again. But even so, the whole narrative of the 30 years, not just since 2022, shows that when the Russians decide, or the Russian government decides, or in many cases President Putin decides he doesn't like someone or doesn't like this company, and they will simply take it away. And this is what they've done. And they've done this to their own oligarchs too. There's actually a very good article, if I may quote the BBC, on the BBC website today about what's happened to the oligarchs. And Oleg Tinkov is an example of someone who simply in an Instagram post shortly after the start of the war, he was one of Russia's billionaires, one of the oligarchs. And he put out that I don't like this war in Ukraine, this is bad. That was it. He was out. He in theory sold his company, but for about 3% of its value, and is now outside Russia. And the oligarchs have all kowtowed to Putin, and yes sir, no sir, three bags full so, because they know that that's what the fate that fate awaits them. So the idea. This amazes me again. A lot amazes me about America these days, and not in a good way. But that these, as you say, this circle around Trump who think, Russia's the El Dorado, we're going to make lots. Look at what the state of the country. You're going to have more than 1 million people who've been through the war, who've been brutalised, who are going back, who are not going to have jobs, who probably won't have the money they've been getting at the front line. They're going to be forming gang. There is going to be gang warfare much, much worse than it was in the 1990s, and that was a problem in the 90s in Russia. And it's not that big a population either, and it's falling.
And strangely enough, this article talks about the fact that it has a $2.5 trillion economy, which is the same size as Italy's, and it has long-term growth, which is weak. The population is shrinking, and there are declining reserves of oil. All these things that, from the outside, Russia is very, very good at projecting a very different image.
It is, and some people fall for it. But the economists surely should be looking more closely. I've just seen a report that apparently Russia has sold about 1,000 tons of gold to China. Well, if they're selling off their gold, then they're really getting desperate. And they are desperate. But of course, Putin puts up this smokescreen saying, all is well. There's also been very interesting an opinion poll published not long ago by the Levada Centre. Now, you have to be very careful of opinion polls coming out from official Russia these days. But this is actually saying that now, if in 2023 more than half the population were either supporting the war or saying, well, jolly good that, our son Ivan has gone off to the war because we're being paid lots of money for it. The latest opinion poll in Russia is saying that 55% of Russians actually are not happy now with with the war, are not happy that their sons will be going off to fight. So there is a change, and it's always tempting to think, oh, well, the Russian authorities, Putin, completely ignore public opinion. No, they don't. And a crucial example of that was that in September 2022, they announced a mobilization, and they called up 300,000 men. And Russians will tell you, and it went on for ages. It was actually stopped after 3 weeks because the vibes they were getting showed that the people around the country, actually many of them weren't happy with this. And so although Russians often are prepared to accept, and history shows us they're prepared to accept more suffering and more hardship and nose to the grindstone than a lot of other people would, it doesn't mean to say that it's going to go on forever. It cracked in 1917, and indeed before that in 1905. I'm not saying it's going to crack again now, but they are aware that they need to take into account what their people are thinking.
In fact, the headline from the Kyiv Independent this morning is the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces. So take the reliability of those figures as you will, but they are claiming that Russia has lost 1.2 million troops since February 2022. I mean, how accurate an assumption is that? And surely there will be a huge effect on a nation and its ability to rebuild and indeed create future generations if you've lost 1.2 million men.
I should say I'm almost certain that they mean dead and wounded. But some of these are so badly wounded that they are not going to be reproducing the next generation. That I've seen other figures from other sources that suggest to me that actually that's not an exaggeration.
Let's talk briefly with you, David, about this idea of companies going into other countries, because it was the age of globalization, which is when China took all the ideas and did very well out of it. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, people get their fingers burned when they think that they can go into a country with business and change the ideology.
Well, not just in the recent history of China. It was ever thus. When I was with Reuters, I always like to quote something I found in a late 19th century board report to the then Reuters board saying, we have made substantial investments in China and we are confident that they will eventually pay off. And 100 years later, we were still waiting. But eventually, some companies do make money, yes, but never as much as they dream of. They see large country, huge population, great market, and they think that it's easy, but it's not. And one of the things that I hope we can get into more detail later is this whole idea that with the rather ill thought out sanctions on Chinese chip buying, we're getting into a new Cold War where we have a silicon curtain instead of an iron curtain, and you have two completely separate internet and AI regimes building up, which means that the barriers to entry for any country, for any company, are huge. When I go visit China, I have to have completely different apps on my phone to get anywhere, and that's only going to get worse.
Some might say, the Americans would say that this is actually not a bad thing, introducing some elements of competition to a nation, China, which has managed to permeate every single part of society and the economy.
But what's happening is that China's developing its own separate apps, its own separate AI infrastructure, its own separate chips, where there isn't any kind of mutual competition. It's a domestic competition within China, which means that outsiders don't have a chance.
And how does that end? Because for so long, that idea of trusted foe or non-trusted friend, untrustworthy friend, that for so long the ability, let's look at the likes of Germany, to separate the ideological and the political differences and just saying, but we'll do trade with you anyway. Now, this is something that they sort of rub together and have been rubbing along together for such a long time. And one wonders whether this is the moment when things are actually being looked at.
Well, who is a friend and who is an enemy? I think when you are, if you are a Germany, if you're a France, if you're a UK, and you're asked to choose, do you choose America at this point? You may have to say that you do, but is that really 100% full-throated, full-hearted choice as an ally? I don't think you can.
For those of us who are not in the room, Stephen has just shrugged.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the lessons of the year, I think, is that Europe, Western Europe, Western Central Europe, all the way up to the Polish, Belarusian border, can no longer consider the USA as a reliable ally, even perhaps as an ally. Denmark, of course, has been in some ways hardest hit because Trump has just appointed an official to oversee the transfer of Greenland to the USA, which is staggering. This is how your supposedly strongest ally is behaving. I find sickening, to be honest, the way that Western leaders, I can see the realpolitik behind it, but the way that Western politicians this year have, am I allowed to use the word arse on them?
You just have, don't worry.
So kissing Trump's bottom, shall we say. I can understand why Zelensky has to do it, and it'd be very interesting to see how he speaks today and so on, because, he's in a desperate situation. But the rest of us in Western Europe, we're not, we may not be in the greatest situation, but it's nothing like the Ukrainian situation. We're not that desperate. And surely they cannot avoid seeing that Trump is totally unreliable as an ally, and not just Trump, the circle around him and the noises coming out of Washington this year. I go back to that vote at the UN when the USA went against all its allies and voted with Russia that Russia wasn't to blame for the war. Everything that's come out of America this year shows that America is not a reliable ally for Europe. And that, if it's clear to me, surely it should be clear to Western political leaders, European political leaders.
All I can think of is that most European political leaders had very different school days than I had, because I learned very early that you just don't give in to bullies. that if you give in to bullies, you're just asking for more trouble. But somehow that lesson seems to have escaped many people.
The time here in London is 9:32 a.m. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Emma Nelson. Joining me in the studio, David Schlesinger and Stephen DL. And we head now to Istanbul. Hannah Lucinda Smith is Monocle's correspondent in the region. Good morning. Happy Christmas, Hannah.
Happy Christmas. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm very much looking forward to some news from somewhere where it's slightly warmer from a very chilly London. So, but no good news this week. We've been desperately trying to find something that isn't death and destruction. But no, you have a catalogue of woes as well.
I do, and I have to say also here it's become quite bleak. It seems like it's going to snow. So
brilliant.
Our weather's bleak as well as our news.
Excellent. I'm delighted to hear all of this. So tell us what gives where you are in bleak Istanbul.
So the first story this week on Tuesday, the 23rd of December this week, a really, really interesting and very tragic incident. A delegation from Libya, a military delegation, including the chief of staff of the army. This is the Libyan Tripoli government. You might know, of course, Libya is a divided country almost since 2011 when Gaddafi's regime fell. The Tripoli government, very close allies of Turkey. Delegation was in Ankara for an official meeting. And shortly after their plane took off from Ankara airport, very sadly crashed just outside Ankara, killing everyone on board. Now, this, of course, is an interesting and tragic event in itself, but there are questions about what exactly happened, particularly because the plane that this delegation was travelling in, and as I said, it's the top members of the Tripoli government's armed forces, was not a military plane or an official plane. It was a hired private jet from a company that has already attracted the attentions of the UN for its trips to Libya. It's believed it's been taking arms and indeed mercenaries to Libya, breaking UN sanctions. So there is an investigation ongoing. The Turkish government was very, very quick, actually, within a few hours, already had released a statement saying it's an electrical fault on board, basically a devastating electrical fault, even while the site was still being cleared up. Now, to give you a little bit of context, the reason why all this is especially interesting is because over the past month in Turkey, there has been a rising number of deniable shadow incidents. I don't know the best word exactly to put it, but there have been a number of unidentified drones in Turkish airspace shot down by the Turkish Air Force. Of course, that's something that we've seen in other parts of Europe as well. There was also a Turkish military plane in November which crash landed in Georgia, killing the 20 Turkish military personnel on board. And again, there's been no kind of full explanation of that incident. And of course, the place that a lot of people's minds jump to immediately is, of course, to Russia, as everywhere else in Europe, when these kind of things are happening now. And I think that's testament to how well Putin is playing this kind of, hybrid war, this war of information, this war of fear almost. That is the first place that a lot of people's minds go.
Indeed, there's quite a lot of talk at the moment that that destabilisation that Moscow is very, very good at is actually creeping into is becoming an explanation for everything that goes wrong when a drone goes up or when something fails. Everybody says it's all too easy to blame the Russians now. It's a very clever strategy done by Moscow. Doesn't cost anything for them to do, but makes everybody else very jittery. Is there a sense that the Russians are really behind all this, or is this one of those destabilising moments?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It's the weaponization of fear, and all Russia really needs to do is maybe do one or two itself, and then everything's kind of blamed on it. I think that you don't have the same kind of real antipathy to Russia here in Turkey that you do in other parts of Europe, particularly in places like Poland, places on the eastern fringe. Turks have always been a lot more kind of ambivalent, although since the invasion of Ukraine, attitudes towards Russia have hardened. More interestingly, I think, is the kind of political context. Erdogan and Putin have had this quite strange, at times quite close relationship for the past decade, which has really kind of worried NATO, worried Turkey's other Western allies. Turkey at some point bought a missile defense system from Russia, which caused huge headaches for NATO. That relationship's been sort of useful since the start of the Ukraine conflict, because obviously Turkey's provided an arena where delegations from Russia and Ukraine can come together. It's one of the few places where that can happen. But at the same time, particularly since Trump came back to the White House, it really does seem like Erdogan is really sort of trying to pivot a little bit more towards the US. I won't say towards the West or towards democracy, because I think it is very much about Trump himself, who, of course, is not a kind of Democrat as we know it. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a report in Bloomberg that actually Erdogan now wants to return that missile defense system to Russia, which would be a huge step. And I think that context is really, really important when we're looking at these events that have happened over recent weeks, because these are the things, this is the background that is sort of making people question, is Russia something to do with this? Is it not? We don't quite know.
Let's move on to a story which I think will tickle Stephen's fancy. 1,000 football players have been arrested.
Yeah, banned from playing. So this is an ongoing and widening probe into gambling and illegal match fixing here in Turkey. Now, to give you some background, gambling is actually entirely illegal here in Turkey. It was outlawed, I think, in the late 1990s. Having said that, Turks are very enthusiastic gamblers. They do find ways. There are no end of sort of illegal gambling apps. Also, North Cyprus, the Turkish inhabited part of Cyprus, is a huge sort of backdoor. There are about 15 or 20 casinos operating there, and many Turks go there. But in recent months, the government has really sort of tried to take a handle, partly because, people are winning a lot of money and not paying tax on it. The government's very, very keen to increase revenues at this point. So the crackdown started with investigations into money coming into people's bank accounts from various gambling sites. It then widened to include allegations of match fixing carried out by players, by referees, and by executives within the football clubs. And it's going right the way to the top. So one of the people arrested in recent weeks is actually a former executive of Galatasaray, which is one of the big three football clubs here in Istanbul. As you mentioned, more than 1,000 players, mostly from the lower leagues, but also some from the Super League, the equivalent of the Premier League, banned from playing. More than half the referees suspected of of using gambling apps. So it's really something that's grown to become a huge story. And of course, Turks are absolutely fanatical about football. It's really very, very similar in many ways to the UK. So this is something that is affecting and worrying many, many people.
Stephen, this is incredible. Everyone's at it.
It is staggering. I must admit I hadn't realised that gambling was illegal in Turkey, so that accounts perhaps for the massive numbers because, unfortunately, I think unfortunately, but it is something that people do get drawn into. But, here it's a scandal if one player, and normally they're not named for a long time until journalists dig around and find out who it might be. If they're being investigated for gambling or for misdeeds, for 1,000 players, wow. I mean, I don't know how they can carry on the league, actually.
Hannah, how did it come to light?
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, in a way, we're kind of like boiled frogs with these kind of things in Turkey because Turkish football is so full of scandals and scandalous events. I mean, anyone who sort of follows it might remember that, over the past few years, there's been a huge amount of matches called off because of violence within the stadiums, kind of match invasions, spectators throwing things at players and referees. So you have those scandals as well. But really, this has come from the government and it's coming alongside other large-scale investigations into what we might sort of broadly group together as vice. There's also a investigation going on at the moment into various musicians, celebrity agents on accusations of holding sex parties and using drugs. Again, it's partly a shakedown, I think. The government is very, very keen to get revenues into its coffers, but it's also a political thing. It's no secret that Turkey is not a particularly free country and hasn't been for a long time. But the crackdowns have always come against more political people, so journalists, politicians, activists. But in the past couple of years, and particularly this year, what we've seen is that kind of broadening to any kind of public figure. And the way that I read this, as anywhere within the kind of artistic spheres, particularly amongst actors, artists, people like that, you do get people who are sort of politically vocal and will say, say their thoughts on various things happening within the country. And I think that is what the government is now trying to sort of push back against, because all you really have to do, as they're doing at the moment, is go after a few people, be they footballers, be they pop stars, make an example of them, and that sort of beats everyone back into line.
David, an expert on China, you have seen chilling effects aplenty, haven't you?
Well, you don't even have to look at China. You can just look at the United States with what's been happening to journalism in the United States at the moment after Trump really squeezed the networks to get payments, get threatened court cases, and people are falling into line. So I think the journalism is particularly affected these days in China, of course, in the United States and elsewhere, as the authoritarian playbook is just used again and again.
Hannah, we may not be able to place a sneaky bet, but you wanted to talk to us finally about something that we can do if we head to Turkey, which is go into a room and smash stuff up.
You've got to have an outlet, haven't you?
Absolutely.
You've got to have something. So for any of you not feeling the festive cheer, a new business in southern Turkey in a place called Diyarbakir has opened up. In Turkish, it's called the Öfke. It means the House of Rage. And what it is, literally, it's an old house. It's filled with old televisions, old furniture, and you can pay to go in there for an hour with a baseball bat, with your friends, if you like, and smash stuff up.
Right, we've got thumbs up aplenty here. David Schlesinger. Yeah. David is one of the most mild-mannered characters you'll ever meet. We only have mild-mannered characters. And he came in, massive smile on his face, thumbs up. You're a happy boy here.
I think it sounds wonderful.
Would you smash stuff up?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. How about you, Stephen DL? Again, ordinarily very, very, very mild-mannered, gentle soul.
No, that worries me, the idea of, you're going with your friends and so, what you then start arguing with them over what you're smashing up. You just start using the baseball bats on them.
You smash each other up. I mean, who's going for this, Hannah? Have you popped in?
I'm tempted. I mean, it does seem like it seems like a lot of fun, doesn't it? It's one of those things that you're never sort of normally allowed to do in normal, polite society. I think that's the kind of appeal of it. But I have to say, its owner is selling it not as a kind of just a fun outlet. He's selling it as a public service. When I was reading the interviews with him this week, he was saying, this is a very angry country. He's not far wrong there. There's all kinds of problems and they're making people very angry here. And you're saying, look, if people don't come into it here, they might take it out on people on the street. So,
Are you an angry bunch?
I mean, I hope I'm not, but certainly, Emma, the thing that makes me really realise how angry this country is whenever I come back to Britain, and I know, people have all kinds of complaints about Britain at the moment, but people seem really, really happy and well adjusted to me there. And then I sort of read all these things in the media about, people being incredibly angry and unsatisfied in Britain. And I come from Turkey and I'm like, gosh, this place is really, really happy. Everyone seems very, very content. So, yeah, I think that's maybe a sign of, how discontented Turkey is.
Hannah Lucinda Smith in unhappy Istanbul. We wish you the very, very best for 2026. Thank you for joining us so many times in 2025. That was our Istanbul correspondent, Hannah Lucinda Smith, off to the rage room with a baseball bat. That's a brilliant idea. It's not a new idea, but it's quite nice that it's doing the rounds again. David, you wanted to bring some more stuff in. I'm joined, by the way, by David Schlesinger and Stephen DL. David, what are the stories that you wanted to draw our attention to today?
Well, it seems to me that after what we've talked about so far in the program, we really should talk about one of my themes for the year, which is that you have authoritarian swagger and democratic timidity. And I think this is something that is really dangerous as we go into the next year, that every authoritarian around the world seems full of beans and ready to swagger around doing what he usually likes. And every democratic leader is timid and fragile and vulnerable.
It's funny you say that, because today is the day that the voters in Myanmar go to the first round of elections since 2021, since the junta staged a military coup. And that idea that no one assumes now that there are free and fair elections. I was hearing an interview with the son of Aung San Suu Kyi, who said he hasn't heard from his mother for 2 years. She was going to be part of the new government she was for a little while an advisor to the government, to the junta. And yet she has disappeared for 2 years. Those voices which actually did not need to be loud have been silenced.
Yes, and when you look around at the state of journalism, as I was mentioning earlier, that's also rather depressing, because it's very hard to have a democratic society without a free and fair exchange of ideas, without everything out in the open. And that seems not able to happen these days.
Now, you were part of the translation team which did the memoir of Alexei Navalny, Stephen. Obviously, that man who was the voice of democracy and was the voice of resistance was silenced more than a year ago, 2 years ago now.
February last year.
And there is that silencing of Aung San Suu Kyi. She is still alive, yet remains in prison. There's a permanent silencing of Navalny. Those voices... tell us, what is Navalny's legacy now? How is he heard?
Well, through the book, Patriot, which has been translated into a number of languages. There is even a Russian version, which obviously if you're caught with it in Russia, then you will be probably just fined rather than imprisoned. But it's... But otherwise, by killing Navalny, effectively Putin beheaded the opposition movement. There are some very strong, very intelligent, very good people who want democracy in Russia. Most of them now, sadly, live outside Russia because they know that if they raise their head above the parapet, or as the Russian phrase goes, if you're the nail that sticks out the most, you get hammered down first. But it's a very Russian thing. And if you look back to over 100 years ago, before the Russian Revolution, the what would then be effectively dissident groups that were in various places, particularly around Europe, found it very difficult to agree amongst themselves. And this is happening again with the Russian opposition now in exile. So you've got some excellent people like Vladimir Kara-Murza, who, of course, was freed, surprisingly, in a prisoner swap in the middle of last year, 1st of August 2024. When he'd been imprisoned, he went back to Russia because he said, I have to be there for my people, but he knew he'd be arrested, put in prison. But he's now out. So, his voice is often heard, and he has a column in the New York Times. But this doesn't really have any effect in Russia because, as David was saying, the squeeze on the media and on journalists, which in Russia this year has only got worse. It just, we thought it was pretty bad. Well, it was already pretty bad, but it's actually got even worse this year. You can't now use WhatsApp in Russia. They're bringing in their own apps, rather like the Chinese, so that that people will be controlled. It's very difficult to get real news to the people there. So I would say at the end of 2025, the Russian opposition is fractured, and I cannot see a real leader. Much as I like Vladimir Kara-Murza, I know him personally, and I like him, but I can't see someone who's got that charisma of Navalny, even abroad, to bring people together.
Looking ahead to 2026, David, I mean, we have seen democracy in Asia tested. We saw it tested in the likes of South Korea, in Taiwan, and also in Thailand. Where are the bits of hope?
Well, South Korea shows that the system can work. Yes, it was badly tested. The then president tried to basically impose his will on the country, but he was then that was put an end to, and the courts upheld the democratic forces. Brazil is another example where the country went down a very bad path and then came back. But those are two examples. And I think the other examples we have around the world is that one bad actor can cause a great deal of damage.
It's 10:50 in Samoritz, which is where we return to now on Monocle on Sunday. Joining me in the studio, David Schlesinger and Stephen DL. Mounting rescues up in the Engadine, excuse me, is our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé. Have you saved many souls?
I have not. Well, you hear the church bells in the background, but I don't think that's for a service. No, everything's fine. There's just been one Danish royal spotting since I saw you, but that's it.
Ooh, who did you see?
I think the Queen of Denmark was having a fag outside Soretta House. Anyway.
Excellent. We love that. We all have our private moments, which have just been broadcast on the radio. How's it going where you are?
I kid you not. It's going very well. You can also hear the sound of blades on ice. So there's a very nice Karsten Holler installation. It's a merry-go-round in pink mirrored glass, and you can sort of hop on your skates. It's made for you, Emma.
It's absolutely, everything about that is appealing. Have you hopped on and hopped off?
I have not. I mean, it's not going fast enough. It's sort of just I don't know. It's like no, definitely not.
How fast does it need to go for it to be fun?
I don't know. I think it's sort of, it needs to be at 45 degrees. Like you need to be properly spinning around, but it needs a hop on, hop off. So, obviously, they don't want to have, labor costs are high up here in the mountains, as you well know. So they don't want to have attendance, I would imagine.
Brilliant. Okay, there's an article I want to draw your attention to that's in the papers today. It's in the Sunday Times, which is talking about, is it time to retire the word toxic? It's lost all meaning.
Yes, ages ago.
Offices, political debates and ex-lovers are now routinely being labelled as toxic. Apparently there's a thing called semantic bleaching. Was toxic ever in your vocabulary, Tyler?
No, I've always tried. Yeah, I've always tried to also just remove it in copy as well, quite early on, because it as soon as it came out of the gates, it already felt overused, and of course it was something to define, as we know, workplace situations. But as you know, then literally everything became toxic. So I'm glad we're seeing the tail end of that.
What other words are we retiring in 2026?
Well, we retired. Festive already was retired this year.
Yes.
Let's call Christmas Christmas. and let's not try to sort of impose our sort of own moral values on other societies who we think might not like Christmas. Because had I called in from Bahrain last week, listen, Christmas is so alive and well in the Gulf amongst Muslim families, I can tell you. So yeah, we should not sort of try to tiptoe around it. So let's just get rid of festive as well.
Okay.
And just Christmas is Christmas. What else can go for 26?
We got rid of authentic.
Listen, authentic self. There's a whole mindfulness, but that went last year as well, hopefully.
Manifesting.
What other ones? I mean, there's a whole world of things in the world of hospitality that need to go on a permanent vacation. I fully agree.
We have hands up, as if in school, in this room at the moment, with people saying, I've got a word. David, you go first.
I think we should get rid of all the therapy speak words. I think your question triggered me, Emma. I think this should be a safe space where my boundaries are protected. I think all those words need to go.
Tyler, how do you feel when you hear those words?
Yes, safe spaces. Oh my goodness, yes. And I want to see an end to everything. Just when we were everything with the ly suffix. So it seems that every .com, it's like Triply and Discoverly and all of these. It's just bad.
Bad. How about you, Stephen? What have you got?
Oh, my word has been for a very long time. It has to be the awful word iconic, which, rather like toxic, has lost all sense. And as someone who loves icons, the actual religious paintings, for whatever, I think they're beautiful works of art, and it's just demeaning these wonderful works of art. Just everything nowadays is iconic. And forgive me, David, but often with an American, it's iconic.
Yes.
I mean,
Tyler,
please,
I think
no.
it's quite hard to have an iconic cake, isn't it?
It is, but I have to say that we're quite guilty of that one. That is another one that needs a red pen too, because you have to be very careful on page, because you've discovered this amazing piece of architecture from the 1960s, along a motorway in Iraq, and it is 75,000 tons of concrete, and you want to use the I word, right? But you mustn't.
No, I think
it's something else.
That's
something else other than iconic.
A lesson for me. The one that I want to get rid of is deliver.
Deliver.
Can we deliver any outcomes? That's an absolute nightmare. That's management speak. Because in my word, deliver. You deliver three things. You deliver post, you deliver milk, and you deliver babies, and that's about it. I'm done with deliver. It's what
can deliver. Can you deliver good service though? I think you can deliver good service. As well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's have 4 into that. But apart from that, you can't deliver outcomes, and you can't deliver. You just can't deliver. Well, I can't deliver at the moment, but it is a problem that I have. I'm very big on iconic as well. Really, really big on iconic. How about you, David? Any more?
Gosh, I think I'm getting old. I hate some of the young words like cringe and things like that. Things that kind of young slang is used too much.
I quite like young slang. It's a new language. It's a different language that we are not designed to listen to. So I quite enjoy it.
I can't use it naturally. I cringe when I use cringe.
Are you cringing in the Engadine, Tyler?
Yeah, it's not one I don't use cringe very often, but I'm with you as well. It's sort of young speak. Buongiorno. Just sorry, I'm on a terrace, I think, occupying space that I shouldn't. Anyway, but
have you edged the Queen of Denmark out of her smoking space?
No, that's one hotel ago. I'm at the Kulm now. That was Suvretta, because you said errands. I had to drop mom off for a morning spa moment. So I'm running a spa shuttle this morning. That's what I'm doing.
Excellent. What else are you doing for the rest of the time? We've got about 30 seconds to tell us what's happening in 2026.
I saw a large group of Turks out in front of our cafe just now, and I know that one of those gentlemen is after a coat. And I'll tell you very, very quickly, we had a break-in here in Samorit. Tens of thousands worth of merch was stolen. There's another word, merch. Can't use that anymore either. And they knew that it was Jose. They knew in the village that Jose was the thief. Anyway, they found Jose. He'd been missing for 2 months. Anyway, all of the products and garments are recovered. and including the coat that the nice Turkish gentleman wants.
Brilliant. Well, I'm glad to hear that there's a happy ending to 2025. With that, we'll wish you the very happiest of New Year's, Tyler, and look forward to having you back on air.
Happy New Year, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests. And, to David Schlesinger, Stephen DL, Hannah Lucinda Smith, and, of course, Tyler Brûlé. Thanks, too, to the producers, Mariella Bevan and Desiree Bandley. And Mariella was our studio manager as well. I'm Emma Nelson. Monocle on Sunday is back next week. But until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend, the rest of your year. Indeed, happy 2026.